Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio and welcome to week 47 of the Stash Buster block series. Our block this week is called Pale Star, and here is my sample block. I kind of reversed the colors in this one. I used the paler color in the background and the darker color in the front. You can do it either way. This one is pretty easy to put together. It's half square triangles and single squares. We do have points to match, which can be a challenge, but I'll give you a couple tips on how to handle that. So I hope you'll stay tuned and I'll show you how to make this block. Okay, here are the fabrics that you're going to need to make this block, and starting with the main part of the star, which would be the part that you want to be in the front. These are the fabrics that you need here, and of course you can switch these colors around. As I said at the beginning, I did. You can put your paler in the front or your darker in the front, whichever you want. But for that part you need 4 pieces that are 3.5 inches square, and then you'll need 2 pieces that are 3 7/8 of an inch square. For the back part of the star, you're going to need 2 pieces that are 3 7/8. And for your background, you'll need 4 pieces that are 3 7/8 and 4 that are 3.5 inches square. So the first thing we're going to do is take these background 3 7/8 inch squares, and we're going to draw a line on the wrong side from one corner to the opposite corner. So just grab a straight edge and a pencil or a pen or a fabric marker of some kind, air soluble or water soluble. This line won't show up in your quilt, so it doesn't matter. And then draw a line from one corner to the next, and you're going to do that on all 4 pieces. So I have all of those marked, and then we're going to pair these up with the 2 dark 3 7/8 inch squares and the 2 light 3 7/8 inch squares. So we're going to put those right sides together. And this is a batik, and just line up the raw edges, and then I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch away on both sides of that drawn line. Okay, I have a 50 weight thread in my machine, and I've got my 1/4 inch piecing foot on, and I'm just going to sew these one at a time. And just swing that around and do the other side. Okay, and now I'm going to cut right on that line that I drew, and I'm just going to use my scissors. You can use your rotary cutter if you want, and that will give me 2 half square triangles. As I open this up, so we have 2 half square triangles. So I'm going to do that with the other dark piece and the other 2 light pieces that are 3 7/8 of an inch. Okay, there are a few tricks in putting this block together, and one of them is pressing the seams in the direction that's going to help you nest them together when you start sewing the units together. In this block, what I did was I made the same unit over and over again. This is a 1/4 of the block. So to get these to nest, you're going to have to get this unit to nest into this one. So you're going to want this seam to go one direction and this one to go in the opposite. So what I decided to do was to press all of the dark points towards the dark fabric. For me, that's the purple. Okay, so I'm going to set the seam and then open up the dark triangle and then press it. And do that with all 4 triangles here, all the dark ones. Okay, and now for the light colored points, I'm going to press those towards the background fabric. Okay, we got all of those pressed. And the next thing I'm going to do is to trim off the dog ears, and that will help eliminate the bulk, and it does help with your accuracy. Okay, now we're ready to lay out the block, and we're going to start with the white square and put that in the corner, and then I need a purple triangle, and then a green triangle, and a purple square. And that's the unit. So I need to make 4 of these units. So I'm just going to go ahead and stack everything on top of each other. So all of the, if I can get these to go right, all of the purple triangles, all of my green triangles, and then all the purple squares. So now I have everything I need to put the units together, and then once I get all the units sewn together, then I'll sew them together into the block. So first thing I'm going to do is to sew this row. I'm just going to chain piece all of these together. So let's go to the sewing machine and start doing that. And you notice when you do this set of pieces here that this seam is already facing towards you, so you don't have to worry about it flipping up while you're sewing. Okay, now I'm going to do the second row, and that will be the green half square triangle plus the purple square. So those two are going to go together, and I'll sew all of those together. Okay, now I have a chain of all of these pieces, and I'm going to go ahead and cut them apart. You could leave them together if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and cut them apart and then press them. And ideally, we're gonna press towards the corner square, which is white fabric for me. And then on the next row, we're going to press towards the dark square. So basically we're pressing towards the single square in each one of these units. Okay, and then on these, we'll press towards the dark. Okay, so now I've got all of these pieces sewn together in rows. Then I just have to sew the rows together. And they gotta go this way. And the way I have these pressed, these two should just nest in together. The seams should just nest in together really snugly, and we shouldn't have any problem with that. We don't have to match anything at this point. When we sew the units together, then we'll have points to match. So let's go ahead and sew these rows together and make our units. here, I just need to make sure that seam doesn't flip up. So there's one. I'm just going to chain piece these together. Now I'm going to cut these apart and we'll press them, and then we can sew them back together and finish the block. Okay, so with these I'm just going to press them. I'm going to have the white square on top, and then I'm going to press towards it. And we're going to press each one the same direction, and that will keep them, the seam should nest just fine doing that. So go ahead and press it the way it's sewn, and then press it open. Okay, so now we can lay the whole block out, and we're just going to rotate these pieces. So this one, that seems wanting to roll up. Okay, so just lay that one down, and then take the next one and just rotate it a quarter. And so now we've got seams going opposite directions. This seam is pressed up, this one is pressed down, so we're doing good. So this one, we'll just rotate it again, line this one up, and then rotate it again, and there we go. So now we're going to sew these two units together, and then these two units together, and then we'll sew the rows together, and we'll have our finished block. The thing is, we have points to meet now. We've got points at each seam as we sew these together, so we need to match those up. So if you turn it so that you can see where the stitching lines cross, right here and there, when you want, what you want to do is to put your pin right in that, in the tip of that point, so it will come out at the tip of your point here, and then take that pin again and then put it through the tip of the point in this piece and slide those together, and then just maneuver it so that your seams are nesting, so they're feeling like they're all snug together, and have your pin, you want your pin perpendicular. You don't want it going down or going up, you just want it perpendicular. And then once you get that to where you feel it's in a good spot, take it out and then pin these together, but don't shift your fabric, just pin that in, and now we're ready to sew that seam. So I've got my raw edges lined up. Okay, now when I get to this point, what I want to do is where those stitches cross, I want to stitch to the seam side of that, just by a thread or two, not much, just by like one fabric thread. Okay, let's see how this worked. Okay, so here's the point right there. So that one is pretty good. And now let's do the other two. And I'm going to do the same thing. And take my pin, I'm going to flip it over so I can see where the seams cross. And so that's on my lighter triangle. And poke that through. and then through this one. And now we're ready to stitch that seam. And I'm going to watch that point again. And that turned out well, I think. And we'll see. That was not too bad either. Okay, so now I'm going to press these seams, and I'm going to press these open because there's a lot of bulk in that area. You can press it to one side if you want, or you can press it open, whatever you want to do. And if you press them to one side, then you're going to need to make sure the next row is pressed to the opposite direction. Okay, for these seams I went ahead and I pressed them open, and now I can sew these two sections together, and I have to match the points right here. So I'm going to flip this over and do the same. Now when I'm sewing, I can only see the seams crossing on this star point here. I can't see it here because of the way this is pressed, but we can still work around that. So okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mark with, I'm going to use a chalk pencil because it's what I've got that will show up. But if you were doing this on light fabric, you would use like a fabric, like a water-soluble marker or an air-soluble marker. So I'm going to mark that line right there, and that way I know where that point is. It's going to be right there. And so now I'm going to use that mark and put my pin through there, and then put it through the point of the block below, and then line these up, nest the seams, and then pin it. And then I want to match this seam up, and I'm going to pin that, and then I'm going to match these points up. Okay, now ready to sew that seam. Okay, I'm getting close to my point, so I'm going to watch where that's going. There's my center seam. And here's the next point. That's the blind point because I can't see it, so we'll see how that worked. And if that doesn't work out well, you can always flip it over and stitch it from that side. Like stitch this seam down halfway and then flip it over and do the other side. But on this side, it looks like it did hit it dead on, so I'll show you that. See, I don't know if you can see, but the stitching went right through that point. So let's see what that looks like. And actually, I think it looks pretty good. So there's that point, and this is the point I could see. So I think we're doing good. So let's press this, and we'll take a look at the block. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press this seam open since I pressed this one, and we'll see what this looks like. Now, pressing seams open is not my favorite treatment of these blocks, or my favorite way to press a block, but there are times when it is what is best for the quilt. And the only thing that it may interfere with is if you're wanting to stitch in the ditch along that seam, because you have no ditch at that point. You've eliminated the ditch, so you either have to stitch right along that seam, or if you stitch in the seam, you run the chance of cutting threads with your needle. And it doesn't matter how tight you sew, how many stitches per inch you've got, you can still cut those threads. So you have to be very careful. And what I would do is just not stitch in the ditch there. I would do something different, like do a continuous curve or stitch 1/4 of an inch outside of that line, and then I don't have to worry about it. But here's the completed block. I think it looks really good, and I think I'm really happy with the points. I think they all turned out really well. I'll give you a close-up of those points. So this is the Pale Star block. Here I have 4 of the Pale Star blocks pinned together on my design wall, and you can see where they join in the center there. It forms a square, and then above and below that we have a diamond shape. And since this block is symmetrical, it's not going to change whenever you rotate a block, so that is the look that you would get no matter which direction you lay out your blocks. So I think this is pretty. It looks like there's you know, another star behind the star in the front, and as I said at the beginning, you can reverse those colors. And I think maybe originally the parts where I had the purple would normally be the lighter color, and then you'd use the darker color behind it on those 4 star points that are green in my block. But I did it this way because that's the way my scraps worked out. I had enough of the purple to make the centers of the blocks, and I didn't have enough of the green, so I did it this way. And but I still like it. So that's one thing you can do with any of your patterns, is rearrange the colors and make them suit what you have on hand, the fabrics that you have on hand, or just your preference for color scheme. So this is the Pale Star block. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.